Welcome back to MSP Confidential, everybody. I'm Luis, your host, and it's Friday again, and it's time for another incredible guest. This week, I have the pleasure and privilege of Mr. Dustin Bonn of Marco Technologies. You're the VP of IT operations over there at Marco. Welcome, Dustin. It's so good to see you again. I hope you've been awesome.
Yeah, likewise. Pleasure being here. Hope all is well with you too.
Yeah, man. A lot of travel. I think we were just chatting backstage. You've been sort of busy getting out there and seeing your clients, seeing your teams, the events. Always keep us busy. You had an offsite, I think, recently, so that'll be fun to maybe ask you a little bit about some of the organizational clarity and things that you try to work through as a growing team. But man, I had this topic on my mind because the number one KPI that MSPs should be looking at, because you posted about this on LinkedIn not too long ago, about a month ago. And it was so interesting because you were talking so eloquently about the need to go look at what is the impact, what are the outcomes that we're helping clients achieve through technology and not, service ticket volume and all these things. And so it's interesting that there's, I don't know, maybe it's a growth and maturity thing of the MSP to finally realize how the KPIs have to shift. But I'm curious to get your perspective, how those have been changing at Marco over the years as the team grows and so on.
Yeah. No, we're all learning, all evolving, but with 50,000 MSPs, arguably 50,000 MSPs, the traditional ways of regurgitating ticket information in perceiving that's value, how quickly am I responding is diminishing. And
Mm.
so, if we're not taking this proactive look forward, how do we help have a seat at the table to drive technology decisions on behalf of the organization or with the organizations? We're going to fall behind. It was interesting. I even heard recently too that, in many organizations now, marketing has a stronger budget than IT in from a decision making standpoint. And so, do we have those individuals that are out driving revenue in the organization involved in some of these conversations? And I think for the most of us, historically, the answer is probably not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think there's been a ton of clarity for most organizations about how to think about their IT budgeting just overall. Maybe folks like IDC or other organizations have generally thrown out figures out there. Oh, for a small, stable organization, maybe 3 or to 4% of your overall turnover should be dedicated to IT. If you're a growing organization, maybe 5 to 6%. And I'm just wondering, like, how much does this need to be updated now, considering how critical technology, even in the last 5 years, has become to every aspect of a customer's business, right? I think that's maybe shifting considerably now, even with AI, I think playing even a bigger role. But I'm curious your sense, what you see downstream with your customers in terms of their maybe honesty towards the budgeting process around technology.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting on what do they classify as IT from a budgeting
Mm,
perspective as well too. And we're still working with clients on trying to just establish basic things like percentage of revenue tied towards an IT budget and being challenged there. So at the highest level, saying, can I get some commitment in dollars? And then let us help us understand how we allocate those dollars. Some organizations, let's say their CRM, are they counting or classifying that as part of their IT budget, or is it going elsewhere? So even just the amount of clarity needed at that level to understand, because we may hear, oh, I've got $100,000 this year to spend on IT. What does that actually mean? And it's changing. So, the application that might have been on premise is now software as a service. How is that budget being allocated? And you could go down, the
mm,
rabbit hole, but even at the highest level to keep the attention of the key decision makers, those are the conversations that they want to show up for because they're trying to learn and evolve and understand the impact of the movement to the cloud and AI and how does that impact them? How's it going to help them grow their business, be more competitive? And what we're finding is, having conversations like that is not only capturing the attention, but allowing us more times to show up. So it's not just the quarterly business review where, 20% of that really should only be allocated at look back and 80% of it should be forward thinking. meeting quarterly for some, that's not enough either. There's just so much going on and so much clarity that can be driven weekly, monthly, that if we're not having these conversations or being welcomed in to have those conversations, they're either going to solve it on their own or somebody else is going to help them with it.
Yeah, really. I'm curious in the while we're on this budgeting topic because MSPs and the role that they've had with small businesses or medium businesses going back 20 years or so maybe has shifted a lot from that keep the lights on type of technology approach to a much more comprehensive thing now, and have MSPs and has Marco as an example really reevaluated the effort, the person power that goes into delivering at a much higher level than just keeping the lights on from a service tickets perspective, infrastructure management, and so on, to now this really critical piece of helping clients think through outcomes and growing their business through technology and things like that. I'm curious what that pivot has been like for you guys.
Yeah, no, even as early as this year too, we traditionally offered, solution engineering, so guidance on an annual technology roadmap, along with some planning along the way for point in time projects. And we had a separate, we'll call it vCIO service, which kind of has early adoption, still kind of that intention of being more involved. We made the decision this year that that's a permissions to play, and I know others have already moved that way as well too. So instead of saying, "Hey, Mr. Client, it's going to be an upcharge or upsell if you may need that," we're just going to bake it in, and so adopted and pivoted some of our resources, and then also, with the expectation, these are business conversations, and technology just
Mm.
happens to be the majority of the output that we're talking about. But the conversations have evolved as well too. Maybe a little less about speeds and feeds of equipment and software, more about data and how integrations into applications, and that has challenged, I think, a majority of us to think differently, because it's less about building your next server infrastructure. It's, hey, we actually need to spend more time talking about the data, the integrations. Are we doing things right? And that's going to continue to challenge us professionally to think more business and a little less technical, not diminishing the technical expertise and guidance, but like I said, to have these conversations at the strategic level, that's where we're showing up the loudest.
Yeah. I think that has been, a little bit of the status quo, right? The speeds and feeds are delivered at a not necessarily a leadership level. And backstage, you were kind of talking a little bit about this concept of leader to leader relationships, which I think are super important. And have you noticed, I guess the question is, have you noticed from the client's perspective that these leaders want to be more involved in their technology and how it shows up in their business? Or are we still, pulling really, really hard from our end to just get them to show up in the first place? What's your sense of that maybe plateau that we were on and the shift into this executive engagement piece?
I For us, I think we're finding a higher degree of curiosity. And when we're presenting ourselves with agendas that aren't talking about ticket volumes and metrics, and we've moved a lot of that to self-serve, so you can find that information. Sure, we can talk about it, but I just can't afford to spend more than 20% of the time in conversation looking backwards. If we got problem, let's fix the problems.
Hmm.
But that's not what we're showing up to talk about. And some of my last conversations with some of the leaders that I'm appointed to, which I'll talk a little bit about the process we have rolled out there, really isn't about technology. It's about some of the latest administration. How is that impacting their business, and how can we help align with them? Some of it we may need to look at contractual modifications or alignment, or hey, actually needs a little bit more cybersecurity help here because I need to get to this destination. I don't know if we were having those conversations 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, not at the same degree and level that we are now. Even about data integration, like, just what does that mean? Are my employees going to be able to see things that they shouldn't be seeing? And so just a lot of curiosity there. And what we did to try to help to be intentional here is it's still in the process of rolling it out, but early adopted with a leadership path. Connected leadership is what we're calling it, is where we're requiring, shouldn't say, or providing the opportunity where we have intentional, meaningful relationships with leaders of other organizations. So instead of saying, hey, I'm an acquaintance of these 5 or 6 or 7 customers. I am personally accountable and assigned to a group of clients that I have requirements to go meet with and have these types of conversations. Sure,
Mm.
I'm opening up the door to if there's challenges or problems. We're certainly not perfect by any means, but I want to have better business conversations because and help bring that messaging down to the organization so our people can understand what they're going through as well.
This is interesting. I think in the shift that a lot of people are making right now on the MSP side, just of that mindset, I think most folks agree. Yeah, we got to make this pivot and have these business level conversations. I think immediately the standardization lens kind of gets a bit in the way. It's like there's no way I have the time to go have this conversation with every single one of my customers. And so I'm curious to hear you tell me a little bit about how you guys think about segmentation, perhaps from a purely relationship management perspective, and how you're systemizing a little bit of the approach to relationships to be able to deliver at this, with the maximum efficiency possible. I guess finding the places where it's going to have the most efficacy and output ultimately.
Yeah, I think the first thing that was very interesting for us too is you first start with saying where do we have relationships that exist already today, and being vulnerable. There's less people that self-allocated themselves to relationships to client than what we were probably thinking to begin with, which provided the visibility and clarity immediately that we needed, and saying, okay, we have an opportunity here. And then from there, we kind of looked at just the client allocation from size and scope, along with some personality where we think we might have, depending on the IT decision maker at that point in time, where we have the best opportunity to have these conversations where they're welcomed. And
Mm.
then same thing, being very intentional. Just the other day I did say, hey, we are having a conversation leader to leader at this point in time, and I want to talk about where we're headed next. And so we're scaling that out. We're also providing it's an opportunity now. We have to coach our team members because it's some individuals are so focused maybe perhaps on the selling aspect versus hey I'm a service delivery manager focused on ticket closure. Take a step back for this conversation and be intentional with this client that you truly need to be curious about their business and how they are doing.
Yeah.
That's the conversation and where it leads us from there. Sure, there's going to be an element of technology speak inside of it, but curiosity wins.
Yeah, the curiosity, that's definitely the thing that's coming out so much. Do you understand the customer's business to a level of, nuance and specificity that allows you to get into these conversations? Otherwise, you're just kind of immediately booted to the curb because they don't get what we do. Just fix our PCs when they're not working, and this is sort of the revolving door of this challenge, which is interesting. So in terms of systems, and maybe I want to get more specific. If I could double click just briefly on this assessment piece of asking yourselves the questions of like who is in the right place for this kind of relationship, or who has the propensity for a deeper strategic engagement or such. I'm curious to ask if there was any structure placed on that, specific questions that you're asking yourselves. I think it's easy to maybe whittle down from the however many clients you have to begin with, just to have a place to start. But then you have to kind of get a little more specific to really, have a process around it. And so curious what that process was.
Yeah, we didn't kind of the old adage, don't let perfection impede progress because we recognize this being a significant opportunity for us. And so we started with just pulling our client list and telemetry, and we've got just kind of a multifaceted business being we've got print clients, MSP clients. We've also got other business lines and divisions. And so we have general managers, and we're starting from the top down and saying, okay, let's help us allocate these clients down based upon kind of where they're showing up the most inside of their Marco relationship. Our intention then is going to actually be developing that inside of ConnectWise. So that's our next piece of the puzzle. But just to get the ball rolling, we started with an Excel spreadsheet and some kind of a simple one pager with some baseline expectations and saying, let's go act now. Let's learn, and then we'll continue to build the formalization of the system, which we'll have that wrapped up for sure by the end of the year and in full motion.
Yeah. I wonder, as you scale this depth of relationship and engagement, have you specifically noticed the maybe category of opportunity, of project, of initiative that is kind of landing on your deal desk, so to speak, that is uniquely different than the things you have been doing before, from infrastructure management and the usual day-to-day stuff? And part two of the question is, had you noticed that maybe the business had to go and build a bench to do some of these deeper engagement things that you're now surfacing as a result of the deeper relationships? And so it's kind of a 1-2 punch. You go and discover some great things to do, but suddenly you realize you don't have the bench to deliver on that either. So some people might shy away from going to have deeper conversations if they're not in a position to do some great work either.
Yeah, so a couple things on that. One is we do have some partnership in areas where we do not have the skill set, and we've determined that at current state we aren't. So partnerships where we've been able to help maximize their value, and then usually there's a return in some way, shape, or form. Hey, I got a client over here that could utilize your services. Otherwise, we do have an innovation team that we built about 2 years ago, and so that's true R&D that's helped us understand, take these conversations that we're having. What are we hearing consistently, and then what are we going to go build, take, or morph what existing and bring back to market? And that has gone very, 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 very well. Just being able to be intentional around what are our clients saying, and then be able to act more swiftly versus, in the past, it's always been somebody else's kind of second job to
Yeah.
go help also build and deploy and launch products. We've been able to bring a couple new products to market faster than we ever have been with just that intentionality. And we wouldn't have that visibility outside of actively participating in peer groups and take a tremendous amount of value, but hearing directly from our clients in our respective areas with our TCP, and then being able to bring things back, even changing the way that we're maybe offering or delivering a specific service, because we've got enough feedback from enough credible leaders of clients of ours and
Mm.
saying, yeah, let's actually stop doing that way. Um, that's an old way of thinking and doing, and that's not driving an outcome that's aligned with the client.
Interesting. Well, I gotta end up like in a menu hell here from double clicking into each of these things further and further and further. And you mentioned, building products and kind of building out your service catalog, if you will. I think this is super interesting because maybe MSPs have not thought of themselves as product strategists from this perspective, right? Because so much of the conversation has been best practice is this, best practice is that. Even right now with AI, I'm seeing a bit of a risk to fall back into this VAR trap of like, well, this client over here wants AI solution A, and I'm just going to go find who makes that and then resell that, but not really, get into the weeds with the client to solve these things from a true technology and innovation perspective. And so I'm just curious to ask you a little bit about that productization process, and how much do you give way to just the innovation and just speed to market versus standardizing the build out of a product to get all the teams knowledgeable, to be able to talk about it and so on, to be able to kind of put it into your whole operations flow, if you will.
Yeah, there's a little bit of it's a both and. Some of them, if they're even just simple add-ons, uplifts, or fine-tuning something we're already doing today, and maybe just changing how we're doing it. Something as simple as PC installs and modernizing our approach to that to not only meet the market but the client experience. Those are things that we can act upon fairly swiftly through that group and that team. In the inverse of that, we rolled out a managed Microsoft platform here. We'll call it 18 months ago. And we're on pillar 3 or 4 of that now, too. And so the ecosystem is continuing to build upon it. And some of those pillars have taken 6 to 8 months to make sure we're getting them right. We're operational ready, got the right pieces and parts in place, systems in alignment to bring those to market. So we're kind of gaining some quick wins that can improve today's experience for existing clients consuming services today, and then the new shiny object as well too. And that group's grown a little bit over the course of time, and the intention there is they build these offerings and solutions in conjunction with the traditional business lines, and then they're responsible for taking them and running with them. So that innovation team is focused on a few projects at a time. They're also, I think they've evaluated, the last time I've checked, 50 or 60 different pieces of software this year. And of course, we didn't choose 50 or 60, but it's allowed us to dip our toes in and say, hey, is this going to meet our clients' needs? Is this something we should evaluate? Is this something of value? 2 years ago, it was, like I said, it's always somebody else's part-time job, and we struggled in that area.
Yeah, I think part of building any product, especially things that are deeper into the service economy, maybe come with a big training and enablement component. I'm curious if you've seen an uptick in how much the team is actually delivering things like training, as opposed to just install and walk away. A little bit of a handoff to a champion inside the organization, and then kind of, yeah, you're set it and forget it type of thing. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, it's an area of opportunity for us as well, but and some of it was just driven through some market pressure on project and services revenue last year. So instead of just handing the client a finished product, are there some services, even kickstart services, or more of that ongoing type services that we could come back and help with fine tuning, configuration changes, refinement, a lot around the Microsoft offering, where some of it was just getting creative to continue to um, keep revenue coming in the door at a higher velocity for some of our project services. But it's also, configuration enhancements for our clients as well too. That there's value there that we may not have been spending as much time on historically.
Yeah. Well, with this post that you had about the number one KPI that managed service providers should be tracking, the answer was it's how early you're involved in your client's business decisions. And the nuance that I want to ask you about is perhaps, obviously, as a larger team, dedicated sales function, what does that look like in the sales component of the process, and how does that transition successfully, to a vCIO, a customer success manager after the fact, so that there's a real, transition there that makes sense and that not too many things are lost in the transition. But also with the qualifier that sometimes we are thrust into relationships as MSPs to solve a specific technical thing that blew up, and we had to come in at a tactical level. And then how do you go pull out to a strategic view when that was the case? And that happens a lot, obviously, in our space.
Yeah, we've operate to the best of our ability on kind of the assessment-led sales strategy. The other, I would say, more operationally mature MSPs have focused on as well. So kind of leading with expectation alignment up front, because there's cases where we're like, oof, this is not going to be a great experience without this type of investment. So trying to lead with clarity on the front side. And some are paid assessments. We've got some free assessments as well too that are providing with at least a posture and sense of the organization from a technical perspective. The key ingredient there is not only to have the visibility, but I really don't want to spend as much time with these clients talking about what they have for a firewall and a switch and an
Mm.
access point. I want to understand what's going on inside of their business. What do they focus on? What are they struggling with? How are they maintaining being competitive? Are they positioned to grow? Like, how are they going to see technology as a strategic investment or partnership to the business versus, some may still see it as a cost center. And if we can't quickly pivot and help those organizations that look at IT as a cost center, um, they may not be the best fit, and they might be the one that every renewal, no matter how good of a job you're doing, they're going to shop around, and somebody's going to be 15% less in price. And we've just wasted our time and energy in an area that, although we receive some dollars, the partnership wasn't going to be long term either.
Yeah.
And so, kind of leading with some of that, allowing the assessment to technically help us answer some of the questions and understand where we might have areas of misalignment. The other thing is we do have, you talked about clarity earlier too, we do have published service catalogs. So to the best of our ability, we went through and defined, what's included, what's not included, what's a project, what's not a project. And same thing as part of our sales process, trying to drive clarity, because where we have misalignment is ultimately where we're going to end up with attrition.
Yeah, the
Um,
scope creep.
usually, yeah, usually you can work your way through a service thing and back to the CBR, being transparent. We go through staffing challenges just like every other business in MSP. But what I found too is some of these relationships, you bought yourself a little bit of grace and opportunity to say, you know what, we're a little short staffed right now. You're going to feel this from an end user experience perspective. I just want to be transparent. But let's not derail the next conversation when we're talking about technology and advancements, because I've already provided you with that level of
Yeah.
insight and detail, but I've earned that credibility to do so.
Yeah, I feel like this is a chicken and egg problem for a lot of MSPs because they probably increasingly avoid a conversation, especially maybe smaller teams, avoid a conversation with a customer altogether if they feel like something is not great or delivering on the contract from a service perspective. And so you kind of put yourself in this situation that you just stop talking to customers altogether because there's always some challenge with service, never realizing that by stopping the conversation, you're kind of eroding the trust altogether. And so the pivot that I wanted to make on the question is with smaller customers, which I know every MSP just about has a whole spectrum of sizes of customers. I think we tend, and I say this a lot, we tend to conflate frequency of conversations with depth of conversations. And I've noticed that a lot of MSPs say, oh, yeah, small customers, we talk to them once a year. I don't know what kind of trust can be built with a once yearly conversation, if I'm perfectly candid. And so I'm curious how you manage a bit of this relationship between frequency and depth so you're not completely abdicating the need to have relationships and conversations with the smaller customers.
Yeah, I'm with you wholeheartedly on this one as well too. Some of your smaller clients may also be your more profitable clients as well too. If you're doing a really nice job and they're aligned with the model, but they're also the ones that you're not showing up enough, they may question what they're paying for. Like managed services at its core would love to pay to have everybody, all my employees never have IT problems, no downtime. There's, costs associated with that, but it's a slippery slope. So we do have monthly cadences where we're looking at our most profitable clients, our least profitable clients, and then we handpick some in the middle. And we're talking about strategy around, are we providing enough value? I fear some of the more profitable ones, if we're not coming to them with a new solution or idea, or if we're not providing them with some more sort of other value, some of these I'm fearful of that our competitors are having more conversations with our clients than we are. And that's not a good thing at all. Saying, hey, Mr. Client, I'm here for your annual review, and XYZ MSPs have met with them 3 times this year. I'm already in a poor position with that client, even if I'm doing the best job in the world. And then we're going to go out and test the market just to see what's out there. And then you're scrambling and
Yeah.
kind of taken for advantage. So that's where we've, like I said, embedded in these vCIO type relationships into even some of these smaller clients because they need help too. Um, May not to the same level, degree, or complexity, but they want somebody that they can know and trust that has their technology decision making and kind of where they're going at heart. And so we are not in a position where we're ignoring. We actually don't detune staffing because of certain levels of MRR. We've kind of treated a lot of the clients in the same position possible. Now we may have different skills set of resources, but some of the smaller clients, I guess kind of relatively speaking, could also be some of your more profitable clients that you're doing a really nice job on. You can fall asleep at the wheel at.
Yeah. That falling asleep at the wheel was exactly where I was going to go next because, from my personal experience, I feel like complacency is a big challenge for a lot of folks because you come in, you solve the biggest issues, you kind of stabilize the environment. I guess it's a natural thing to just kind of take a step back, be like, okay, these guys are good now, and you kind of move on to other things. But it's really hard to keep that engagement level up, and so as you grow a team, I imagine this probably magnifies to a certain extent. And I'm curious how you keep a bit of that, I guess, dedication to be focused on the issue and the problems and the customer's outcomes so that it doesn't become an issue of complacency. It's such a delicate fine line to cross, of course.
Yeah, organizationally, we have adopted kind of a get, keep, grow. And so there's very specific definitions, and we have a RACI matrix tied to specific who's doing what inside of the account. So, same thing. I can drive the clarity internally, and I really want our clients to feel that as well too. If we're doing a good job internally, our client should feel that outcome just naturally. And so what we have with our customer success managers is a specific dollar amount that they have from an account allotment or account allocation perspective. It ends up being somewhere in that 30 to 40 type client list from an account, some a little bit larger, some a little bit smaller. And then we are focused on more industry alignment so we can show up and have better business conversations versus I'm talking to healthcare client today, banking client tomorrow, manufacturing the next day. being able to show up and speak in a relevant term that makes sense to them and start to better understand the
Yeah.
applications they're using, even at the account management level. So they can start having these conversations and have a better strategic seat at the table, not even just our technical people.
Yeah. Let's get back to a bit of the KPI conversation because I'm curious to ask you. I mean, you knew what the bad KPIs were. Obviously, you've probably gone through a phase where those were the thing on the dashboards. Um, and I'm curious as you think about how do we stay involved in relationships early, often, and so on. How is that changing some of your other KPIs? And there's this question from Richie. I'm not sure if you can read that there, but I'll read it out. What are the risks of focusing too much on KPIs? And how can organizations ensure they measure meaningful outcomes rather than just numbers? And so to the point of the outcomes, how do you connect customer outcomes to internal KPIs, and what are some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah, we've even taken a step back in some of the things like smile back. It's 97, 98. It's like, well, that's not really solving any problems. It's not really leading or providing me. It's great information, but it's not really able to help me drive specific
Mm,
outcomes. So we've even peeled it back a little bit in terms of what's important. So we are looking at, of course, client profitability because we're looking for areas where there's problems on either side of the fence, as well as we are measuring kind of the product pull through of clients as well too. Just because we believe there's a fair share that we should be capturing inside of the client spend. So if they're not spending the dollars, are they spending it with somebody else? Or are they just truly not investing inside of technology? And the conversation with them is, hey, we feel like you're going to fall behind. And it's less more about the dollars. It's, hey, we've had some standards of saying an organization of your size and scope. And I think most people do like or resonate with relating to somebody else. It's not always about keeping up with the Joneses, but we can say, hey, a client of yours, because we've got a sizable quantity, typically is spending about this per year for in healthcare for your type of organization.
mhm.
Starting with that message and saying, hey, I see you're a little below the cuff here. It's not necessarily all about spending. It's okay, well, how are they spending those dollars? What are they doing that's different than me? What are they doing to attract more clients? What are they doing for client retention? What are they doing for application integration? So trying to force the conversation that direction, but utilizing just some real basic KPIs that I would say for the most part are even maybe not the specific dollar amounts, but just the general statement being able to share with clients as well too.
Yeah.
Um,
And have you found that there's been a tuning of your internal KPIs to account for needing to drive engagement and relationships as well? Because I feel like there was people are kind of black and white on these things sometimes. They go from either a vCIO that has a project quota, which is very transactional, of course, and suddenly it's like, oh, we're going to do engagement now, and they literally eviscerate what they're doing before. So have you hybridized that, or have you pivoted to a much more engagement focused type of KPI for the people in relationship driving positions?
Yeah, much more engagement. So even simplified, even some of the way that we have compensation. So it's truly, truly tied to specific outcomes. So even for our account managers, right or wrong, is we don't base them upon the revenue coming in the door. We believe that our client retention is the most important thing for them.
Mm,
Sure, we measure those other things, but we've even simplified the way that we have compensation to truly, truly drive what is number one. They're waking up every single day focused on X. Now, when it comes to the kind of the upsell, cross sell type motion, well, that's vCIO carries some responsibility inside of that as well too. In some cases, we look at it as aggregate, saying, "Hey, do a good job for your book of clients," versus less about this specific client needs to spend this specific dollar amount. We'll boil it down to that, but that's not really the desired outcome. You got a whole portfolio of clients that we want you to do a good job in, and you should be able to deliver the messaging pretty consistent across that portfolio of clients. They're not just focused on one versus the other, and you can kind of use that knowledge or that telemetry to kind of bounce ideas past some of your other clients as well too.
yeah. This level of engagement obviously is way more hours and time and things than we used to do in the back in the good old days. And so I feel like this is something that has caught a lot of MSPs by surprise, where what was normally being factored into how they priced a managed services agreement really did not factor in any of this kind of engagement or strategic conversation. And now they find themselves kind of underpriced heavily, like, and not by a little, by a lot. And so I'm curious to ask you, how have you guys been thinking about your pricing to really take into account all this strategic engagement, or do you at all?
Yeah, no, we did. Some of it is we invested back in the business, and so prematurely in some areas too, before we had supporting revenue to hold ourselves accountable to. Some of it was showing up in attrition, saying, "Hey, others are doing this, so the cost of us not investing in this time, energy, and these resources far exceeds the investment that we're making." And so we put
Mm,
together a business plan and strategy and said, "Hey, we need to be showing up more focused, outcome driven, and louder for these organizations because if same thing, if we're not, the competition will find their opportunity to do so. The good ones will." And so some of it is we redirected some areas of the business or individuals in the business to certain aspects. Some cases you make some choices. Maybe we don't want to do some of these things over here and redirect some of that talent in other areas. We've been able to use just some of our growth as an opportunity to reinvest in some of these areas, and then kind of backing it with just some automation opportunities that we've had to same thing, kind of position some dollars to reallocate towards this client outcome focused mentality.
yeah. Well, that's certainly the pricing is one of the many perhaps barriers of people sort of making this shift into this critical engagement model. But I'm curious to ask you, and maybe if you can possibly put on your small MSP hat for a minute, so that people can start thinking about it now before it becomes a bigger problem for them. What would you think is the number one barrier they need to be watchful over to make sure they don't, enter this commoditization trap by not having started soon enough on this engagement piece?
Yeah, I think even in some of our earlier days or my earlier days, is it's the ability to say no first and foremost. So it's probably elementary, but not every client's a good client, and I think sometimes we fall down this trap of saying, "Hey, I can make something out of this opportunity," and the odds are, if you're asking the question, probably not the best fit. And the opportunity cost for our own
Mm,
individual technicians' time, personal, our own time, far outweighs the opportunity in itself. I think the other thing is we have a right to win and a right to add value to these clients, and really, really being specific about what that looks like. It's connect why I say 15 to 18% of MSPs consistently are unprofitable over the past 2 to 3 years
that's
through
scary.
the SLI data. And that's scary. That's scary because that's some of the competition we're forced with. And I think what will happen is just continue to be genuine, trying to be honest, even in part of the sales cycle. We aren't for everybody. That's for darn sure. But if we can come to a general alignment and agreement, we ask for a fair price that, generally speaking, the market sets. For the most part, the market's kind of setting the rate based upon different
Mm,
levels of operational maturity. But I think one thing that we had did just to help with our kind of right to win or positioning from just an operation maturity is putting time and energy in, and it was harder than one would think for just a service catalog, so we can sit in front of the client and saying, these are the expectations we're holding ourselves accountable to, which is different than the MSA. It's different than the terms and agreement. It is a bulleted catalog that says there's going to be things in here that if you read through this, I bet you're thinking they're covered as part of your agreement, and they're not. So being able to force the conversation that direction, just take clarity and alignment, because it's a people to people trust business, and then compounding with some data versus kind of showing up with a pretty proposal. We've really tried to be bullish on a professional sales experience that the answer might be no or not today, or here's the steps that we would need to take in order for you to become a good client. Which the last 30 days I've probably had 2 conversations with clients saying, "Hey, I think we're going to be your best next stop. There's a few things you need to do in order for us to deliver a good experience, and we're just not aligned quite yet, but we're going to get there at some point in time." I wholeheartedly believe that.
I think you're referring to something that is so critical, which is focus and execution. I heard this great expression in the last week or so. It's your success is inversely proportional to the number of commitments you make. And I thought it just kind of hit deep because we have this hero mentality as technical people that are in service of our customers and saving them from their own demise type of thing. And I think we want to help as many people as we can, and that comes in many, many shapes and forms. And I want to press you a little to maybe give up what the pre-focused, pre-execution driven states might have looked like, and how you went through that transition. I know these things are not easy; they're not overnight either. And some people are just kind of fumbling a little bit with just distractions and a ton of things that they're working on and just not able to focus. And this is the reason why they're kind of stuck in that, 32% of MSPs that don't make money. But
Yeah, it's taking a step back, and for us, like, we're intentional about the data, and back to the question, and it's not 1,200 KPIs. I firmly am on the less is more. Get a little exhausted with some of the reporting and some of the units of measurement. Not that they're all not important, but the 3 or 4 or 5 most important things, and then really, really holding ourselves accountable to the why. And so I mentioned a couple of them as well too. MRR under management per person. We understand too internally, like the quantity of end users per technician. Those are all fantastic KPIs to run the business, but they're not driving the next outcome. And so, although I think different levels of the business, we have to be focused on different KPIs.
mm,
And some of these do need to translate into client conversations. So, like I mentioned too, I'm very transparent with clients about when we have staffing challenges. It will happen. I'm doing it by grace, not excuses. So I don't just distract the relationship because they only think about the last best experience versus, hey, let's continue to talk about your AI policy that you don't have yet. Let's help you co-author that. And how's that going to impact the business? Or let's talk about automation. Um, so I think that's where we're doing more in focused type approach here on really, we're even detuning some of your old Power BI dashboards, just saying, hey, those are no longer relevant. They're more perception of noise at this point in time. They're not going to drive the business forward. Let's just stop doing those and get into a healthier spot so we're not in analysis paralysis and we're focused on similar metrics. So, and we're in the process right now overhauling our Power BI dashboards, and we're taking a top-down approach. We have all the data, but let's start at the top and then we can work ourselves down. So you have a tree or a system now that we're all looking at similar information at the right level of the organization.
yeah, I think the thing about things like AI is not that it's new. I think we've had so many new things over the decades, and we've always figured out, how to bring that into the ecosystem, if you will. But the rate of change is particularly surprising, and I think this is the thing that maybe scares a lot of people, and why I kind of started to notice that there's this different urgency about it that kind of gave me pause for thought. It's like, I wonder if people might just revert back to this VAR state of like waiting for somebody to just give them something that's prepackaged and ready to roll out, um, as opposed to like a really deeper consultative approach with customers on having these conversations. And I'm just curious how you think about this rate of change, and if there's systems in the business to take that head on. I think the rate of change is always the thing that surprises people.
Yeah, I think so too. And um, for us, I think like most, we're trying to lead with assessment or analysis of clients at this point in time too. Let's assess where the data is at. Let's assess where the opportunities may be. It's almost like too. I think the future is having an AI for the AI, as it's all getting built inside the individual applications, which will
Yeah.
probably create its own silos of data and nuances. But for us, it's really trying to help clients understand where there might even be potential. And I think that's where the conversations could start as well too, is at the leadership level. Are they truly bought in? Are they truly bought in to AI, what it means versus automation? Like, it's got to start there, and it's got to have some level of commitment, or back again, curiosity. Otherwise, we're kind of beating our head against the wall here if we're not talking at the right level. And so it's very interesting. That's a lot of the conversations I'm sure most MSPs and clients are talking about is, what does this mean for me? Where do we go next? And I think it's going to allow us to have another level of relationship because we do have to better understand the client's data, the systems that we've maybe supported the infrastructure on. We're going to have to get another level deeper than some of us maybe historically have. Some MSPs are probably a little further down that journey, but a lot are, start at the data level above, right? We're not at the applications. Call your application provider. It's going to challenge us, and to get another level deeper because
Mm.
those are where that's where the gold is going to be.
Yeah, you talked about clarity a couple times, and I think this is one of those things that for the businesses themselves, I think they've never been put in a situation to have this much clarity to be able to make a decision to move forward. Whether it's the way their data is currently being managed and all these other components of doing an assessment that is AI, forward. And so it's interesting when I have conversations about this, just how all over the map clients are on the clarity about their own organizations on this. And so I'm curious to get your take about how do you operationalize a bit of that mayhem, because it must be difficult, of course.
Yeah, and we're on the early stages of the kind of building out the assessment, and we're doing some things internally too, more to even help our sellers out of some of the point in time kind of solutions that we already have established. But even just starting with what questions to ask
Yeah.
and what type of answers you're going to get, because there could be a perception of at the same thing at the leadership level, you know, some conversations we're having is, hey, they're going to take white collar jobs. And so are we going to be able to get to that level of conversation intelligence with some of these clients? But that's where I'm saying we're not at the top and saying, hey, are we bought in to at least be curious about AI, how it can help impact your business? Generally speaking, the answer is yes. And then saying, okay, where do we go from here? Well, we have to understand your business at a level that we don't understand today. And I think starting with that clarity and just being abundantly transparent, that's saying, well, you're our IT provider. Yes, we are, but the expectation is at this level. We need to get to the next level down, and we're going to have to spend some more time with your employees. So it's more the assessment or questionnaires, maybe even less about bits and bytes, more about, okay, tell me about these four people in your accounts receivable. I need to understand how they do their job in order for me to understand where there might be opportunity. So I think it's going to, even the assessment, we've done a good job of leading with tech level assessments. I think it's going to be better questions and curiosity is what's going to drive some of this
Yeah.
forward.
Now, organizationally, and maybe as a way to kind of bring this all back together, I think this clarity inside of Marco as an organization really less is more sometimes. The priorities that you communicate to the teams, you can't have this disparate number of priorities and things that just sends people in wild goose chases and such. And so I'm curious how you think about the priorities and where the different weights influence some of those decisions. Just operationalizing priorities, I guess, is the question.
Yes, we're just on the heels of 2026 and beyond strategic planning, and so kind of resetting and reevaluating our priorities into this next year, which is going to provide opportunity as well for some of our employees that'll obviously reach our clients. But really, it's focus at this point in time. So we go through and as part of our quarterly business reviews internally as well, quarterly strategic meetings, and we've got a set number of initiatives, and we're standing, delivering, reporting on how we're performing against those. And sometimes the outcome's great, and sometimes it's a work in progress. But trying to use those as saying this is what we've determined are most important to the business, not trying to devalue something that is actionable that we need to take care of. But when I'm meeting with my individual direct reports, it's pretty specific in terms of what we're talking about in overall direction that are going to help us continue to drive the right outcomes. Now
Hmm.
they can evolve, certainly can evolve too, but I've been extremely focused this year on just operational clarity, trying to draw on some noise out of the organization, make sure people understand truly what's important. We all do report to the clients, doesn't mean they're always right, but client experience focused first, and then same thing. There's maybe some things that we're doing
Yeah.
today in onboarding that, hey, these are old ways of thinking or doing things. They're not driving outcomes for our clients. So let's just stop doing those or pivot those into a different direction.
We were talking about rate of change in the AI context, but I think this is influencing obviously the rate of change of priority and decision making at a organizational and leadership level. And it's interesting that I get the sense that many organizations are starting to feel like an annual strategic meeting is so long away from like how fast things are moving in the industry right now. And many folks just don't have the mechanisms to pivot quickly when they're already, on the run. So curious to ask you a little bit about that and how you've maybe tuned your operations to be able to adapt to quicker pivots and changes throughout the year.
Yeah, we've adapted some of the Patrick Lencioni framework, and so kind of the weekly, just very, very tactical. If it's helpful for others, is kind of your weekly tactical updates. Those are ones that I'm leading to try to talk about what the week in reverse. More importantly, the week ahead, so we can drive clarity. It's 45 minutes a week that I'm saying let's be intentional about. These are business level conversations, and all of them have some element of conversation we can drive down. Otherwise, we used to do the annual strategic planning. We've moved it to quarterly, and just because it's that and things are evolving and changing so rapidly, and if it's on a spreadsheet or in a Word doc and forgotten about, and we wait till the end of the year,
Yeah.
we're just not we weren't effective enough. So now we are. We're getting leadership back together quarterly, learning things, trying to build better relationships in a remote world as well too, and then just asking each of our business leaders to do a short, concise report out on the health of their business, a couple KPIs that are driving their business. So it can't be not 6 or 7 slides. It's very clear, concise. And the number one thing is we're asking for vulnerability. Um,
Mm.
where are you struggling? Where do you need help? And it's been very rewarding to watch other leaders support and embrace. Hey, I've been through that experience, or hey, I've got an idea for you. And their paths are adjacent to each other, but sitting down in a room and having that type level of intentionality, helping each other solve these problems, or challenge, saying, hey, I think this isn't going to help the business. This is just noise.
Wow. Dustin, thank you so much. What a great conversation. I feel like I have to cut it off now, otherwise, we'll go for another hour easily on some of these rabbit holes. Like I said at the beginning, I think I'm like very many menus deep from where we started originally, but I appreciate some of the nuance. And this is what I like about this longer format, is just being able to take some of these topics and explore them a little bit more. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate your generosity of mind, of spirit here. And it sounds like you guys are doing some great things. So thank you so much for coming on to hang out with me for a bit.
No, I appreciate it. Still very much a student of the industry, and I love the community. I love people helping people. We're all fighting similar fights, maybe different battles. And so I truly, truly appreciate the MSP community.
Yes, sir. Kudos to you for that. And I feel the same way. Well, folks, this has been Dustin Bonn, VP of IT Operations at Marco Technologies. We're at MSP Confidential. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again to Dustin, and we hope you'll join us for a future episode. You can catch all the previous episodes on the YouTube channel. At GoScalePad is our handle, and we'll hope to see you at the next one. Dustin, hang out backstage for 2 secs, and we'll see everybody very soon. Thanks again.
Yeah.